Good afternoon, everyone. People are just coming into the webinar, so I'm just gonna give everyone a minute or two here to get situated. We appreciate everyone showing up this afternoon. Looks like as always, we have some great guests to bring some nice stories to you to hopefully teach you what you should or shouldn't be doing out there to improve efficiency and cost. So I'm pretty excited to get this webinar going. But if you just give us a minute, people are just coming in now. The numbers are adding up quickly here. And for anyone's information, as we go through this, the webinar will be recorded, so we'll be playing it on our website. You'll all be informed about it. So just going to give one more minute and then we'll get started. So welcome everyone to our BarkerGilmore GC Advantage webinar. We're excited to do this on a monthly basis. We're thrilled to hear so many positive reviews after as far as people getting value out of these webinars. So we're happy to continue them. We have them scheduled throughout the year. Today is going to be strategies to effectively manage external counsel near and far. And you all have the good fortune of Audrey Rubin leading the webinar. Audrey is known as our go-to person for legal ops. And the reviews from the people that Audrey has coached and effectively worked with have just been that she's helped them optimize the law department function and save a lot of money. So needless to say, it's gone over extremely well. We have just a quick overview here. BarkerGilmore, as everyone knows, we are involved with the executive search of general counsel, chief compliance officers, but we also help build law departments. So if someone's looking for a mid-level opportunity, mid to senior level counsel on their team, we're the people that you want to call. We are bringing great high EQ quality talent that knows how to service strategic business partners. So I just talked in terms of what we have coming up. Our next webinar is going to be, I'm kind of rushing through this, the transformative value of executive coaching for in-house counsel. One thing I have to say, and I'm just so proud of it, the team we built of general counsel who have joined our company in the advisor role. We do a quality audit following every search or every engagement. And one of the things we're really proud of is over the last 3 years, our coaches have all received a 5 out of 5 for the 3 years running. So we're really thrilled at the value that our team is providing, and I think you'll see from a coaching engagement what it can do for you. So that's coming up next month, March 27th. So be on the lookout for that. And during the course of the webinar, feel free to send your questions. We'll try to get to the questions throughout the webinar. If we don't, we'll try to get to most of them afterward and send out some notices as far as what our best answers would be. But if you just scroll down and ask a question throughout, we'll be visiting those questions. So don't just wait until the end. And in all said and done, as I reminded some people on the way in, some people were just coming in, we are recording the webinar today, so we'll be sending out a notice in the next few weeks about when it's going to be live on our website. We'll also have a white paper that outlines the good findings from today. So I'm going to introduce Audrey again. She was Global Law and Compliance Department leader over at Aon. As I mentioned before, Audrey is the king of identifying our opportunities to improve performance and optimize costs for law departments. So Audrey, thank you so much for taking the lead on this, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, John. Welcome, everybody. As you can see, we have a phenomenal panel today. Jackie Rice is going to introduce herself. You can see her incredible credentials: General Counsel and Corporate Secretary of MillerKnoll, international company. that keeps growing, apparently. Jackie will tell us about that. And Adrienne Valencia Garcia, Senior Vice President and Deputy General Counsel of Cengage Group. So, Jackie, would you just do a little brief introduction of not only your title, but how using outside counsel pertains to you, maybe the size of your department, where your matters are located, et cetera.
Of course. Thank you, Audrey. And it's a pleasure to be with you all this afternoon. Thank you for joining us. As Audrey said, my name is Jackie Rice. I am the General Counsel for MillerKnoll, and some of you may not be familiar with the company. We are a combination of Herman Miller and Knoll. The two companies merged in 2021, but we're a collective of incredibly dynamic brands that take a purpose-driven approach to designing modern, insightful solutions globally, as Audrey said. You might be familiar, and actually I'm normally based between Chicago and Michigan. I'm actually sitting in East Greenville, Pennsylvania, in the Knoll, the original Knoll manufacturing facility. I'm in the library. I joked earlier that I was going to do a show and tell if anyone needs to know about our product. But some of our more famous products are the Aeron chair, the Eames lounge and ottoman, or our Aero Saarinen table. We employ about 1,000 associates across 36 countries, distribute our product through a very robust distribution network in about 100 countries. And yesterday I celebrated my 5th anniversary with the company. It's been an incredible ride, and previously was with Target and General Motors for the better part of my career. To Audrey's question, we have as I refer often, a lean and mean legal team comprised of about 19 total legal professionals. Of those, we have about 11 attorneys across the globe and 8 paralegals or compliance professionals. The team is split between the US and Canada, China, Denmark, and India. And we also obviously we do a tremendous amount of work in-house, but given the small size of our team, we leverage outside counsel quite often, and across a number of our subject matters, particularly in jurisdictions where we don't have a legal presence, which is, as you can imagine, given our size, is many. We do work with outside counsel globally, and I'm excited to talk a little bit more about that.
Thank you. Adrienne,
Absolutely.
you want to give your little self-introduction?
Of course. So I'm Adrienne Valencia Garcia, as Audrey mentioned, and as you see on the slide, the SVP and Deputy General Counsel over the commercial function at Cengage Group. And funny enough, BarkerGilmore was the company that helped to place me at Cengage, and I was not familiar with the brand. So kind of similar to what Jackie was talking about. We're an ed tech company bringing learning and career improvement resources to learners all around the world. We're currently at about 5,000 employees, and our legal department is similarly lean in that we have probably about 10 attorneys, and the rest of the group is comprised of legal professionals between paralegals, compliance folks, and then we also have an incredible legal ops function. So as we talk further, I will definitely give a plug to the value of having a legal ops team in-house. But as a result of the international reach and the variety of regulations that impact the space that we're in, we too leverage outside counsel often. And so are always looking for ways to collaborate, be more innovative, and definitely efficient, particularly around cost where possible.
Thank you. And at my role as Chief Operating Officer of the Aon Law Department, we had a large department. We had about 400 people in the department. Of course, Aon is a large public company around the world. We did have law and compliance and actually government affairs in our department. So you can see we all have international experience, but different sizes, different industries. And I think you're going to hear a lot of different things today. So let's start out with this. Because we all had or have international work, I'd like to explore the issue of how we hire, oversee, manage counsel for international legal issues. For example, do you hire local counsel? Do you do the hiring? Do you have an in-house lawyer that is responsible for a particular region and they do the hiring? Jackie, can you start answering that question for us?
Absolutely. And I'm going to apologize in advance. I have had I don't know, something for the last couple of weeks. I'm going to try not to cough, but if I do, I apologize. To directly answer or indirectly, the answer is it depends, which I know is a super squirrely question. But it does matter on the subject matter that you're considering, the nature of the issue being reviewed or investigated. I would say I tend to do I would say a hybrid. First, I rely very heavily on my team that is actually sitting in these markets who knows and actually brings their own experience to bear in terms of outside firms that they've used on different matters. I also I would say particularly in more complicated, sensitive investigations, I actually try to use a US based firm that has a relationship overseas because so often the issues come up and there's some nexus back to US law. And so I like having that, it's more expensive, of course, but I like having that 1-2 punch of someone kind of thinking about the US considerations, and then obviously someone that's expert in the local, you know, not only the local law, but the local culture, the local nuances, et cetera. And so I think it really is a combo platter depending upon the nature of the issue. I know, for example, we have done some M&A activity in Denmark. Obviously, we used a local Danish firm for that, and they have stayed with us, and they are exceptional on a complex investigation in Europe. Again, I did a combo platter of someone in the US kind of overseeing their arm in this particular market. So it really depends, and I try to leverage people who are on the ground and have the best knowledge, and then again take a more hybrid approach.
Adrienne, do you have an example of something that works for you or has not worked for you in terms of counsel all over the world?
Yes, actually, similar to what Jackie shared. When I was before joining Cengage Group, I spent almost 16 years with IBM, and there we had the benefit of a lot of local attorneys in most of the countries that we did business. And so when you had a more localized matter, so the one that comes to mind was something that was specifically in Australia. And while some of our US multinational firms would certainly have a presence in Australia, there were some sensitivities where having those localized relationships was really going to be important. There were some sensitivities, and so we leaned heavily on our local legal team to identify the preferred lawyers and teams that we should consider for this particular matter. Similarly, when you have matters that might touch a variety of countries, we prefer to have, like Jackie mentioned, leveraging a firm that has international scope. Could be US based, could be European based, depending on where the countries are in play. But there is a benefit to having things streamlined and socialized so that you have that consistent approach, while also leveraging the local cultural nuances and, of course, language where that is an issue to be considered.
Yeah, have you had any experience with issuing RFPs in other countries where maybe they're not so familiar with the RFP process? Either of you?
Sounds
No.
like Jackie may have. We just went through it locally, so I'm happy to share about that. But Jackie, I saw you.
Absolutely. And we have actually just recently, and we actually leverage a platform that has global capability, which is incredibly helpful. Again, I asked the person on my team that is most familiar with the jurisdictions to kind of lead the development of the RFP, the selection of the counsel that we were going to invite to participate in the RFP. But it was an exceptional, and I have become a huge advocate for using RFPs. thanks to someone who might be on the screen at the moment, because I think it really helps you. First of all, I think competition is incredibly healthy, even when you have longstanding firms that you've worked with for a long time and will continue to work with. But new idea generation, and yes, I think, Audrey, to your point, it was a little bit of a new experience for the firms, but I actually think that benefits everyone because it gives people a different experience and an opportunity to participate in a process that they may not have otherwise. So highly recommend. I would recommend using someone that is on the ground to help kind of shepherd and ensure that they're providing input on the firm selection. But it's so helpful having different responses, different pricing considerations, alternate fee arrangements, that sort of thing. Different strategic approaches to how you're going to manage the matter, whether it's litigation, investigation, compliance issue, et cetera. So highly recommend.
And
Thank
I would,
you.
I
Go
would
ahead.
add one of the things that really jumped out for us through a recent RFP process was identifying more opportunities to leverage some of the existing firms. So it almost validated that some of the relationships really were fit for purpose. And there were other groups within the firms that for whatever reason we had not leveraged, perhaps because we had other firms that were the preferred go-tos. But as a result of the breadth of the RFP process, it wasn't limited to, well, you currently do work for us in these two areas, only respond to that. It was, these are the areas where we're looking to bring the expertise onto our panel. If you have it, please elaborate and whatever the requirements were. So that was really pleasantly surprising to see opportunities to further expand the relationships, because then the more work that you can drive to a firm, I think it also opens opportunities to leverage different pricing models.
Thank you. So speaking of pricing models, I know I was able at Aon after a while to ask a couple of international firms to give us one point of contact and one price because I was tired of calling the office in fill in the blank, Paris or Sydney or whatever, and having to wait for that managing partner or relationship partner to get back to me with a fee price or, will they do an alternative fee or whatever. And as we know, most law firms operate under the model of each country usually has its own budget. So in point of fact, we really were waiting for, in my example, the relationship partner of Paris to give me a price because they had their own budget. In an RFP, I was able to negotiate one point of contact, one fee structure around the world. Have you run into similar problems? Jackie, you're nodding your head.
I would say what we've tried to do, and I would say, being completely candid, I think we've been moderately successful in this. But when I joined the company, there were we worked with a myriad of different law firms, which is great. But there were certain firms that I thought were a little bit more strategic partners than others, and so we tried to build you are a preferred provider to us. And with that comes, we want to make sure that we have a relationship partner that, to your point, Audrey, is our single point of contact, regardless of the type of subject matter. So if there's something going wrong, I want to be able to call that one person and have him or her kind of navigate whatever is happening within the firm. And I think that is incredibly beneficial. We also, I think Adrienne just made an excellent point about you might use a firm for a particular area. It also gives you the opportunity to say, we've got this crazy issue that just came up. Do you have someone in your firm that can help us with this? And again, going to the relationship partner makes it much easier than cold calling, Googling and cold calling the person who has FDA compliance or whatever the specific expertise might be. The other thing that we've tried to do with these relationship firms is bake in standing training obligations that the firm will provide to the MillerKnoll legal team again, we're a very small team. We are resource constrained for the most part, and so we have to be very creative and agile in terms of how we approach handling our development and professional evolution, if you will. And so part of that is, we try to do it quarterly. I think probably biannually is a better cadence, but part of that is we want you, because you know us, you know our culture, you know our industry, you know what's happening in the organization at a given point of time. We really want this to be a curated set of training that will help us respond better, more quickly to the business, because things move quickly, as we all know, and the lawyers don't want to slow things down ever. So I think a little bit of that, and again, admittedly, we have been moderately successful in that, but I think it's a great, and I wouldn't say use it for 15 firms unless you're Anne. But if for a company of our size, I think having, call it not more than 5 to 7 of those firms can be really beneficial.
So when you're picking these firms, can you explain or can you discuss with us, in addition to pricing, and I don't necessarily mean the lowest cost, I mean pricing that is suitable to your operation. In addition to pricing, were there any other standout factors that helped you select either the international firms or the firms that were more regionalized? And I'm going to give you, for example, in the US for many years, I would ask about the diversity of the firm, the diversity of the team, and get very detailed about that. However, diversity varies around the world. What we mean by diversity in perhaps the US is not necessarily the same as what is thought of as diversity in some of the Asian countries or South Africa, for instance. What other factors have you looked for? Are you able to look for? Do you ask that they speak English, even if it's not their first language? What other factors help you pick excellent counsel to handle your matters, or your around the world matters and your local matters? Adrienne?
So I would say the space that we're in is education, right? And right now, more than ever, there's a lot of regulatory activity, primarily in the US, but certainly it has ripple effects around the world. And so part of our big focus with this most recent RFP was almost the anchoring element, not in addition to copyright, intellectual property expertise, because we are a content creator and provider, was really finding those firms that had not just, self-named experts, right? Because we're seeing a lot of Gen AI experts, and really, it's still untested. You may be interested in it, but to really find those firms that had practitioners that had actual tangible education regulatory experience, whether it was by virtue of their lobbyist team, by virtue of their attorneys, whatever combination, but to really be able to speak into the different business models our various groups were looking to explore, anticipating, well, how would we need to pivot if in fact the regulations come out the way that they've been, initially drafted and published for comment? What about if these changes happen? Do we need to go and get licensed in all 50 states if we go down this path? What would that look like, right? So all of those elements go into how we run our business in the near term and the long term. And so for us, that specific area of expertise, which isn't something you find, you might think I was educated. It's not something that's just readily available. It really is a niche practice. And so identifying those attorneys and practice groups within firms was really a key consideration for us.
Jackie, anything to add?
I think that's excellent. And I would add to what Adrienne said. I think that the things, diversity is, of course, in the countries where it's, to your point, Adrienne, we do try to ask, who's getting the origination credit on if it's if on a particular matter, what does your staffing look like for this particular matter? Because we want we want the firm and the people working on our work to look like the people who work at MillerKnoll. We are at our heart a design company. We design solutions, but largely in the form of furniture. And so intellectual property is paramount to our organization. I really enjoy when a firm is familiar with what we do, when they've taken the time, even if it's a new firm that we haven't worked with, they take the time to actually get to know us and provide a tailored response that speaks to the industry that we operate in, the jurisdictions or markets where we are, as opposed to just looking at the request and giving kind of the standard response. I think that's another consideration. And then also just the creativity factor. Have they worked with if it's litigation, have they worked with opposing counsel? How successful have they been? Do they know the judge on the matter? If it's an IP issue in a different country, have they worked with customs, either US customs or someone else? So sort of what are the creative solutions that they can bring to bear that we may not be thinking about? I think it's easy to think about we'll do X, Y, and Z, but if they bring A, B, and C, and that's really novel thinking, I think that's a standout, and certainly that we would probably pay a little bit extra for if it made sense in the context.
Do you ever, do either of you ever have your, let's say your local counsel or your regional counsel coordinate with another outside firm? Perhaps there's an international investigation going on, or we're concerned about, as you were saying, some import-export new regs or data privacy. That's a big one. How do you ask your firms to coordinate their legal advice? Jackie?
This is real life. I think the key is, and again, this is in the spirit of, people make mistakes. I think I've learned this through unfortunate trial and error, I would say. But I do think it's really important to, first of all, make clear if you have a lead firm, if you want someone kind of acting as, again, a single point of contact, they're really driving the strategic direction on the particular matter. I think that's incredibly important. I also think it's important to make clear what roles and responsibilities are. We want you, because everybody knows these matters can splinter off in 1,000 different directions depending upon where the facts take you. And so I think it's really important to communication is obviously is key. Having standing calls, once a day or once a week, depending upon the urgency, to say, what new information do we have and how does that alter what we're doing or how we're doing it, and making sure that the firms are clear that this is firm A, this is your lane, and firm B, this is your lane, and making sure that they know that they need to raise their hand if those lanes are becoming unclear, or if lane C has suddenly emerged and you have to jump on top of that. I would also say that, again, I touched on this, the communication is absolutely key. And I also, I prefer to have the lead firm someone that is familiar with us, our company, our culture. John used the word EQ, and I can't remember if it was before the call officially started, but someone that understands our culture, someone that understands our risk tolerance. That can be really tricky when you have an issue pop up in a jurisdiction where you haven't operated or had legal issues previously. And so, working with a firm that understands the intangibles, I think is incredibly important, and can bring that to bear with whatever local firm is being used.
So that, and I think it's one of my mantras is clarity is kindness, right? So making it clear who's the lead, and that everyone else understands it. And that can be really uncomfortable for the other firms, right? Because you want to show the value that you're having. And ideally be the lead when the next opportunity comes. So it's navigating that balance between, okay, the client has instructed this firm is the lead, so we will coordinate there, build that relationship with that firm. Like, think bigger and broader as far as the opportunities that present themselves, because the next matter that comes along, that lead firm could be conflicted out for whatever reason, and you become the reference point. And so it's not just for purposes of with, us as the client saying you're the lead, handle it. But I think it's an opportunity for the outside firms to navigate that discomfort in a way that benefits everyone, ideally in particular the client too.
Interesting. So I have another kind of random question here about using Counsel all over the country or all over the world. Have either of you ever had meetings where most or all of your outside counsel were invited together? Traditionally, it used to be, we don't want to meet each other, we're competitors, kind of a thing. And I know DuPont, at least I attended one or two DuPont meetings where all of their outside counsel would come for a day to meet each other, share news about the company, so on and so forth. Have either of you ever engaged in that, or would you think of it? Adrienne?
So I have similarly heard of those types of meetings. I can see so much value and benefit, if not only from the networking perspective, but just idea sharing, and just thinking outside of the box, because all it takes is one nugget that then, kind of, it's the seed that then you leave and you start thinking about, oh my gosh, I'd never thought of, right? Fill in the blank. And so having that exposure, it's the same idea behind diversity, right? The more diversity you have in the room making decisions, the more fruitful the conversation will be. So similarly, by having different firms with different approaches, with different cultures come together to talk about what they do well, what they're looking to improve, what their focus is, can be hugely valuable.
Jackie, anything to add?
I would add, if it's on a particular matter, without a doubt, I don't care if they're competitive. They need to hear the same message once, and I don't want people playing, telephone with what our strategic direction is, what the intended outcomes are, et cetera. I think it's a great idea, and we have not done this in during my tenure thus far, but I feel like, yes, they are competitors, but at the root, they're all trying to serve the client. And I think hearing what the client's expectations are broadly, and what they expect that relationship to look like, what they're looking for their legal team, I think is really helpful. It may even be helpful in that context to have a business person come in and give a perspective on, the legal team and the legal support that's provided. How great would that be for the firm to hear that? Again, going back to that sort of understanding our culture and our risk tolerance. So I think it's an excellent idea. I have not done it in a more general sense, but
Well, let me know.
will.
We can work on that
Yeah.
offline, because I really believe in these group meetings. I think the expense is totally worth the outcome. You will find people who are working on the same matter for you, and they're intersecting. They're kind of sort of being inefficient, maybe. They didn't realize it or wasting time. Do you ask your outside counsel about how they use and whether they will use artificial intelligence and other technology? Jackie?
Your question is so timely. We are actually revising our outside billing guidelines at the moment. And what we're asking is, and actually the RFP platform that I mentioned was a great example of, and it actually helped us because we now have an AI policy for the company, and a community of practice that we've developed to make sure that people feel open and transparent, raising their hand to say, I want to use this, or my supplier wants to use this. Is it allowed? And so we use this as a test case to say, and it was actually, again, using AI to read RFP responses and try to glean some of the more critical information, and connected our tech teams and everyone got comfortable, and we said, yep, we're opting into it. I think for me, I'm open to it because I think there's nothing but learning opportunity. The only thing is I want to be asked first, and I want to know in what capacity. And I also want to make sure it's a proprietary tool so that our critical, confidential, privileged information isn't going where it should be. But I would say, baking it into your outside counsel billing guidelines, or just general guidelines to say, if you're going to use this in some capacity, before you use it with us, we'd like to have a conversation about it so that we can explore all the issues that everyone is thinking about and concerned about. But to me, I think there's so much opportunity there, and I think we as legal practitioners have to be thinking about what's next, and so it just presents a learning opportunity.
I agree so much with that, Jackie, because we've seen the pendulum swing in the various directions, right? So some companies have just put an outright ban, like no use of generative AI, which depending on what your business is, that may make sense while you explore potential impacts. The reality is it's being used, right? It's just embedded in the ways different companies are doing business in different capacities, of course. So there is the benefit of just, again, that clarity is kindness. Let's have that conversation. How are you using it? What tools are you using? What protections do you have that our, confidential information, to the extent you may be doing, IP related work, that our proprietary information is not getting swept in and suddenly we lose the protections that are a differentiator. And so just being transparent as far as, well, how are you looking to explore it? How will that impact billing, right? Because are we being charged for the tool and the work that comes to double check from the human perspective that what came out of the tool was in fact accurate? Pick and choose, right? You certainly don't want to get double billed for the same work.
Awesome point.
Interesting. So we do have a question from the audience about describing situations in which we felt that we had to terminate a relationship with an outside firm, and why did that happen, and how long did it take us to move? And I will tell you, a couple of things there about my own. First of all, in one instance, it took way too long, way too long. And it had to do with strategy, and I hate to say it, but probably considerable padding of the bills by this law firm. And for those of you out there, if you care, if you are a law firm and you make a mistake like that, you will probably never get more business from me or anybody else on the team, which is a word to the wise. The other example I had was a law firm that told us, actually this happened twice, that they could handle a particular specialty of the law. And it turned out, that really wasn't their thing. And so we were not getting the most attention. We were not getting the best service. And again, they just shouldn't have even offered that service to us because they weren't good at it, and it hurt their reputation, in my mind, going forward. Adrienne, do you have any examples of leaving and why and how long it took?
Oh, breakups can be so rough. So yes, we had brought on a firm, and like the honeymoon stage, everything was going great. They said all the right things, they presented in the right way, they had the expertise we were looking for, the rates were great. But then once you start actually dating and seeing where the relationship can go, it turned out responsiveness was a big issue. And what was happening was, it wasn't just, so perhaps someone who has a higher title gets a quick response, right? The CEO sends an inquiry, he or she gets a response right away. But then the people a few levels down send something and it's crickets. Always answer, even if it's to say, I got it, let me get back to you. What's the time frame? It doesn't matter where they are in the organization because you don't know who is asking them to get the answer. So respond, definitely. So there was this lack of responsiveness on a consistent basis. And then in a particular area where our internal SME was saying, we're very comfortable with a certain amount of risk. So we need you to give us very practical guidance, how far, we can go to the edge and we'll determine. And for whatever reason, they could not get there. And so they would keep sending these, memos that were just all very verbose. You can't figure out what the answer is, case citations. And then you're like, so what's the recommendation? And then we'd go back. Okay, so what are you saying? This is what we're comfortable with. And ultimately they came back and said, we're just not comfortable with that, the risk you're willing to take.
Whoa, that's terrible for the law firm. You're the company, you're the client, even
Yes.
in a law department, running a law department.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, we're not the only people that have a decision unless, in my head, it's criminal. If it's going to be a criminal activity, then the law department says, no, 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 no. But if it's, we think you could lose more money this way, but we could still do it. That's, we're not the ultimate client necessarily if we're in-house, I mean.
For sure. And listen, I totally get needing to protect yourself, do a memo to the file, that it's captured. You can in the conversation say, while our recommendation is this based upon what you've directed us, here's what you can do. And so ultimately, and this is where I think, legal ops was really helpful in our context. The team was able to collect all of those data points and give the firm and the relationship partner the opportunity to course correct, right? Like, hey, we've noticed this. This is the feedback we're getting, right? So that opportunity to adjust, they just weren't able to get there. And so, yes, we had to break up, which led us to the RFP and just sort of like a reset, which ultimately worked out well.
Do you think that when we're selecting outside counsel, do you think that such things as rates and fees indicate the excellence of the legal advice or not? That's kind of question number one. And question number two is, when picking a firm, I had another thought about this. What about the fact that you really like your team, but they're going to move up? Like an associate will go from a 5th year to a 6th year to a 7th year, get more expensive, and then maybe a partner. So this is a complex question, Jackie, literally. This is about, what do you do about the succession plan of your team? And what's your opinion on fees versus quality of service?
I love that Adrienne keeps using analogies, so I'm going to try one myself. I'm not usually very good at them. I think your question about cost versus quality, I think about the way I think about wine. And just because it's a $90 bottle of wine does not mean it's going to be any better than the $20 bottle of wine. And that's where, you have to try. So I would say that's where I think RFPs can be so helpful. And I also think that it gives the firm creativity for a company like ours and a team like ours. My budget is pretty tight at all times. I think it's getting tighter. I think most of us are dealing with that at the moment. And so the firms who are willing to say, what do you need right now? And try to tailor it to that. I also actually appreciate that when they come forward and say, this is a really discrete, nuanced issue. And if you want the best, because the stakes are high in a particular situation, I'm like, I got it. That's okay. I'll take the X number of dollars per hour partner because I need the best quality I can get. So I don't think that cost necessarily equates to quality in any way, shape, or form. The succession question, I have to say, I have followed lawyers from firm to firm.
Yeah.
I think it goes back to that when you find someone who's got amazing legal skills, high EQ, and really takes the time to understand the culture and the risk tolerance, that is, I will pay more for that because it just yields, Adrienne's point about, please don't send me a report that in writing without talking to me first, that basically says what you're about to do is absolutely, ridiculous and you shouldn't do it and you're gonna break all sorts of laws. Please don't do that. Let's have a conversation about it first. Let's understand, again, the other thing that I would say is, and part of the reason I have followed, and I think Adrienne really alluded to this, someone that not just dictates what the law is, but tells you the practical implementation, of how you can do that, I think is value upon value upon value. So, in the case where I want to see people succeed, I think that even for my own team, I think the critical piece with outside counsel is just making sure that they're thinking about it and that you're communicating to them, here are the reasons I love you and the reason I pick up the phone so often when I have difficult issues or questions. Please make sure that the team that you're building and who is in your succession plan understands the value of that and is going to bring that same approach to bear when they're going to be working with us. But it's a tough one because you want people to advance and evolve in their careers. And but I think there's a way to balance it.
I once refused to pay a law firm because they gave me the memo Adrienne was just talking about, like a 20-page memo.
Unbelievable.
And I said, I can read the statute. I don't need you to read the statute and quote it. I need some practical advice. I'm not paying you.
True. It's very
Adrienne,
frustrating.
what is your thought about keeping the team with you and some of these other very practical concerns?
Yeah. So on the succession planning, there is so much value in that, right? Like I feel as though our business clients do an excellent job of planning for the inevitable, whether it's a retirement, whether it's a situation that, members of the C-suite move off, get promoted, get, poached. And so they build a bench or make an effort to be very intentional about building a bench. And so at the firms, there's also that opportunity, right? Whether it's the relationship partner, the managing partner, at some point, even if you're, looking to work until you're 80 because you love what you do, the legacy is about pouring into others and helping to build them up. And similarly, for the junior members of the team to do that for the even more junior members of the team. So it shouldn't only be the senior person's responsibility. I think is, you look like first day of law school, look to your right, look to your left. There's somebody else who can benefit from your experience and kind of pulling people up and helping to guide. If there's someone who has an interest in a particular area, give them the opportunity. You may not want to bill the client for all of that, but there are other ways to get credit, like billable credit, right? Business development, networking, whatever the categories are, so that the time isn't lost, but you're building those deep-rooted relationships so that people will follow you and, keep some of the work with the firm because you've built a strong bench.
Do either of you use firm report cards? And if so, how have they been going for you? And do you use them around the world?
Sounds like another great Audrey tip.
Yeah.
So
Are we allowed to write notes down while we're the presenters? Because I just took another one.
A firm report card, it can be so valuable because, first of all, it requires the firm to tell you how they think they're doing monetarily and in every other way. And it gives you an opportunity to sit with them and give them your feedback, not only on how they practice law, but on things like, did anybody ever, could I reach you over the weekend for an emergency? Or, who else knows about me besides you? I mean, is there somebody else that I can call if you're sick? So it's those kinds of report cards. And then I know that some companies share the findings of those report cards with their other counsel, which is why I was asking. This is particularly used lately in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Another company of your size in your industry has way more diversity on our team, another firm than you do. What's happening here? I was just wondering if you use them. The report cards, especially the self-reporting cards by the firms, can be really, really useful.
see that. And I think the way the firms would respond to the request will also be very telling, right? Because I've heard from others who are in the position of doing RFPs where firms that had been doing work for the companies were then asked to provide diversity, equity, and inclusion information. They opted out. And so they had never been asked to provide this information. And that just showed that for them, it wasn't worth the investment and keeping the business. So
Well-
even the concept of the report card would be very telling. Do they engage or not? And how meaningfully do they engage?
Whoa, that's incredible.
awesome.
Yeah, that they don't even respond. That's incredible. Do
That
you
that part is incredible, and I would say, Audrey, that is one area, and we don't call it a report card. We do require reporting on, and again, the value of a technology platform is it can automate it for you, because with the number of attorneys that we have, we couldn't do it across our firms. But and I think Adrienne's point is an excellent one. If someone's not willing to respond, that that sort of it speaks volumes. The silence speaks volumes. So we do collect that, and actually we share it with our. We're trying to connect it now to our supplier diversity activities and make sure that we're getting credit from a law firm perspective, because they are our suppliers, and I think it really has it has helped. We've gotten smarter as a result of it, and I think it's an idea of exchange of ideas that I think can be really, really helpful, particularly in the diversity area.
Since both of you run companies that are based, well, essentially in the US or have a large US presence, do you require your outside counsel in other parts of the world to also speak English?
So I will say my experience has been the lawyers do speak English. So it's never been a requirement, but the talent is just there in spades. And I have to be honest, sometimes the English, especially the writing, is more impressive to me by virtue of it being a second, third, or fourth language. And they communicate so beautifully, complex issues. So it hasn't been a requirement, I think, because by virtue of practice, it's just always been there.
I would say the only time I agree with Adrienne, I think that the default is it has not been an issue where we've had to ask. I do think in some parts of the world, we operate in fairly more remote areas. And so if there's a local issue that comes up and you want to talk to, the firm, it's not going to be a large firm that typically will know the answer or know the ins and outs of the local licensing or local zoning requirements. In those instances, I will lean on our internal lawyers to work with outside counsel if they don't have English speaking capabilities, and sort of act as that go-between. But I would say those are pretty rare exceptions.
Interesting. I know we ran into it once with setting up an alternative hub of Aon lawyers, but in a country that did not use the common law, right?
Oh, great point. Yep.
And if you're going to be running our fill in the blank legal services, we need you to be at least aware of Western law. And it turned out that so many of the lawyers in this particular country, it happened to be Poland, had in fact studied or interned for Western-based law firms. So their common law experience was there, but it was very interesting. So we're kind of at the end. This has been so fabulous. I learned so much. Let's just, close it out with Adrienne. Do you have one word of advice about the best way to manage your outside counsel?
So the word of advice, I feel like it should be one word, but it's going to be a lot of words put together. Especially when you're starting off a new relationship. I just had this happen where we had a privacy question. The privacy partner came on the call, but she had 3 other more junior attorneys who would be doing the day-to-day work come on the call. And the first thing she said was, don't worry, you're not going to be billed for all of these attorneys. My thought was having them here to hear directly from you versus me hearing and then going back and then coming, right? Like sort of the game of telephone. It made sense to have a more robust conversation. And I have to say, first of all, she level set right off the bat. And then it just made sense. So we weren't, also from my perspective, having the same conversation multiple times. It was an interactive conversation. We answered the questions. We got some interesting information. And it just made sense, that initial investment of time, the write-off, however it has to happen behind the scenes, it was worth its weight in gold. And it just built a good foundation of trust from my perspective.
Yeah, that's a great one. Jackie, your closing tip? You're on mute.
I was trying to avoid having you all listen to my coughing, but I apologize for that. I would say, especially for smaller or budget constrained legal teams, really think about that strategic relationship. I think it can be an incredibly beneficial, they're in fact an extension of your team. And if you think of it that way and sort of manage the relationship that way, hold them accountable, you know, Audrey, to your point, whether it's report cards or service levels or just dialogue on a regular basis, I think that can be a really effective, and if it's not working, you know, don't be afraid to say so, and say it often and say it loud until it's fixed.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Well, I thank you both so much for all of your time and thoughts and your brilliance. And I hope that people in the audience learned as much as I did.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to jump
so
in and
much.
thank you both. Just incredible presentation. Start with you, Adrienne. First of all, I couldn't be more proud to know that BarkerGilmore placed you. Second, I know exactly why Laura jumped on hiring you as her deputy general counsel and successor. You have the gravitas. You're definitely on your way to being general counsel, and boy, your tips were spot on. Communication skills, 10 out of 10. So thank you so much. Jackie, your stories were worth their weight in gold. I appreciate all the stories. The one thing that just resonated the best with me, you're the only person in the world next to me that uses wine tasting as an example. I love it, the analogy. I use that every day I'm at a wine tasting here, and I can tell the difference between good and bad attorneys the way I like my wine. So
I love it.
Napa,
Good to hear.
Reserve, that's my preference, and all day long, that's what we're looking for. So, anyway, thank you all for being here. Audrey, you brought in two amazing guests that really brought a lot of value to the table. And we hope we see everyone on March 27th when we have Haiti Olinger and A.B. Cruz, two serious pros on our team that are going to be putting on that presentation. So thanks again, everyone. Have a great day. Have a great end of the week, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you all.